Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. We have a surprise important stream today, which I definitely didn't expect to happen. We already have our MarkTech Pro Max YouTube supporters, YouTube channel members right here on the stream. Angelica is interested in my opinion here, and Max Maximus leaving us a thumbs up super sticker. Haven't seen a super sticker in quite a while. Thank you for the 249 and Relay joining the chat. Let's see how lively we can make this. This was very impromptu, very unprepared, barely got time to change and stuff like that. But today we are going to talk about Apple announcing the new Apple Intelligence powered, or at least with some update coming later this month, iPad mini. This iPad mini is of course not powered by Apple Intelligence through Magic, but through the A17 Pro processor, which is the same processor as in my iPhone 15 Pro Max. So a last generation chip, still a very powerful chip, a chip we kind of expected to fizzle out given that it's being manufactured on TSMC's N3B node, not the newer and more widely available N3E. I'll get later to why I think they're using the A17 Pro. So whoever you are, if you're joining here, if you're here for the first time, if you're just enjoying yourself, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it, and make this a lively live stream. Comment, agree with me, disagree with me, tell me something to debate you on or something like that. It's always welcome. And of course, you can already see ways to support this channel. You can leave a small donation in the form of a super chat or a super sticker, the way Max Maximus did. You can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out again to Max Maximus and Angelica, who are MarkTech Pro Max supporters right here on YouTube. Or you can also be a supporter on Patreon. Drama Llama, haven't seen you in a while, my brother. Welcome. The Russians did not see this coming. Yeah, this was a surprise unveiling. This is also seemingly not something that Mark Gurman predicted in any way. Maybe Apple basically canceled the October event that was rumored and said to themselves, look, the MacBooks are kind of leaked. Let us just show the iPad. There's a chance that tomorrow we might be getting the M4 MacBook Pros now, or at least next week. I kind of don't see it happening later, which would be great because that is before I go to visit my cousin and we'll have terrible availability of tech there. So that's definitely phenomenal to see. Yeah, but what are we getting here? Well, you can see the design is the same as last year, or the year before that, or the year before that, because yes, the iPad mini is basically 3 years old. Now it gets updated from the A15 chip to the A17 Pro. So even though we are talking about like a 3-year gap, we are talking more about like a 2-generational jump. However, there's a lot here with the A17 Pro to discuss. Small morsels of improvements across CPU, GPU, of course, ray tracing support, but also even stuff like faster USB-C, thanks to the controller that we also had on the iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max that allowed you 10 gigabits per second. Anasul also joining the chat. Don't think I've ever seen your name. Welcome to the chat, brother or sister. It doesn't matter. Saying and yes, and a lot of happy emojis. Love seeing some happy some happy emotions happening right here. So glad to have you all guys over here. So the other kind of I guess one change that you could kind of notice by looking at the iPad mini would be potentially looking at one of its accessories, because the new iPad mini supports the Apple Pencil Pro. Now it's important, you can kind of see, if I zoom in a little bit, that the front camera is still on the shorter side. So Apple did not do what they did with the iPad Air and the iPad Pro. They didn't migrate the camera here, But in my opinion, that's a wise choice because the iPad mini, for one, there's no magic keyboard like accessory for it. And of course, it's kind of more designed to be a portrait mode device, given that, of course, like when you read and stuff like that, that kind of better mimics like a regular book page and stuff like that. So to me, this iPad mini does make smart decisions. Now, it hasn't changed everything. For example, the screen is still a 60 hertz LCD display with the same 8.3 inches in size, the same 500 nits of peak brightness. There's no mini LED technology here. There's no promotion technology. There's no big switch to OLED or, God forbid, tandem OLED. Yeah, it still has like the Touch ID powered power button, or the Touch ID enabled power button, I should say. Still the same like dual stereo speaker setup. So a lot of stuff that is kind of the same, but also at the same time, there are some smaller improvements that you might not suspect immediately that come from, of course, like hardware moves forward, but also one piece of hardware, in this case the A17 Pro, enables other hardware to shine more as well, and we'll get to that. So how does Apple argue, why does Apple say you should be getting this iPad mini? For one, they're pitching, of course, the Apple Intelligence support that will be coming later this month, at least in the United States. I'm in Germany, so I'm kind of, unfortunately, not very much getting it in the end of October. Maybe Apple will make it easier to access it outside, like in Europe, because it's kind of easy to access it if you're not in one of the supported regions. Everywhere outside of the European Union, where it's an absolute pain. Again, still ultra portable design. I wish they kind of would have made the bezels a little thinner, but again, no redesign. That's probably up for something next gen, but let's see. Armored Core 6 rocks. Hey, they're looking forward to an updated mini. Yeah, I actually think that, like, while the update is, of course, it's not so huge in the sense that like the screen is the same, the basic design is the same, but I wonder if just the value proposition of the increased performance and some things that I will be talking about shortly really makes up for that. And maybe somebody who was like really looking at the old iPad mini and thinking, oh my God, Apple just launched the M2 iPad Pro and stuff, the iPad Air. There's of course the super powerful M4 iPad Pro, and the 11-inch version is very thin, very light. Look, it costs an arm and a leg, but that's like a premium solution. And with the iPad mini still keeping older hardware, people were like, oh man, that's really not great value, even in comparison to other iPads. Of course, you can buy like Amazon tablets for $90. Nobody's arguing that, but those are crap. But let's say you buy something in the $300 range, usually you can, except for raw performance, you can match and even exceed some specifications of the previous $500 iPad mini. So Apple definitely needed to step up their game at least a little bit, and I'm glad they are here to do so. They're calling it a brilliant 8.3-inch liquid retina display. Liquid retina here just refers to an LCD screen with slightly rounded corners. So don't expect here to be any improvements. I checked the tech specs. It's still 500 nits. It's still the same pixel density, which at least it's funny enough that the iPad mini has the best pixel density of any iPad at 326 ppi. The rest is at around 264, but that's because Apple believes that you will be holding the iPad mini much closer to your eyes. So it kind of matches the pixel density that we had going from like the iPhone 4 on. And then of course, given that OLED has a different subpixel structure, Apple had to improve pixel density on the OLED iPhone. So yeah, the iPad mini now has this higher for years has had this higher pixel density than the iPad Airs, the iPad Pros, and those never really caught up. Apple is just keeping the same pixel densities on those products. So, A17 Pro, how does Apple advertise it? Huge performance boost for even the most demanding tasks, a faster CPU and GPU, a 2 times faster neural engine. That's, of course, over the neural engine in the A15 in the previous iPad mini. With it comes support for Apple Intelligence. This is one thing that really matters because, well, I know the time gap is big, right? Between like the A15 iPad mini and now the A17 Pro iPad mini. The fact that from one gen to the next gen, we're getting double the memory, right? The A15 inside the iPad mini did not have 6 gigabytes, it had only 4. So Apple is jumping really a lot here when it comes to available RAM capacity. They're doing the same thing with storage, jumping from 64 gigabytes of base storage to 128. So the value proposition is much, much better than previous generation. And I would argue it's probably a similar value proposition to how the iPad mini was at launch 3 years ago, but definitely throughout like last year, and especially after Apple upgraded the iPad Air and iPad Pro, it just looked so sad being $100 cheaper than the iPad Air, but then having like an old slow chip, relatively like half the RAM, half the storage, so a worse Wi-Fi and stuff like that. So definitely a lot of stuff that is getting improved here, and with it is also boosting value. There is a slight improvement to the back cameras here, which is hilarious, but it's not an actual hardware upgrade for the cameras themselves. It's an upgrade to support Smart HDR4 because, yes, the old iPad mini was so old that it was still based on Smart HDR3. Now, of course, you guys would know that the A17 Pro, of course, can support Smart HDR5. That was a big thing that came out when the iPhone 15 Pro generation was introduced. However, you need to consider that, of course, the actual camera hardware in the iPad mini with that ancient 12 megapixel small sensor, barely capable of real HDR, not capable, at least according to how Apple treats it, of night mode. So getting Smart HDR4 here is even surprising, and I wonder how much it really gets out of that old small sensor. It uses machine learning to detect and scan documents right in the camera app. You know, like this is the kind of shit you start mentioning when you really don't have too much to pitch to people, but you still kind of have to sell people on this device. So it starts at the same $499, 128 gigabytes, double the storage. So again, double the memory, double the storage, double the neural engine performance. You can take it, decide for yourself if that's worth an upgrade, or maybe you were somebody who was unsure of like the previous iPad mini and now you're really in the market for one. Definitely a better deal. And if you're somebody who can be happy with the previous iPad mini, I assume it will help push pricing, especially as stores try to get like rid of existing last gen iPad mini inventory. Like I assume that will push pricing quite down a bit on those older iPad minis. You can pre-order the new iPad mini today, and availability begins October 23rd. So that's a week and a day from now. Then there's some marketing stuff here. There are 2 new colors. Unfortunately, Apple is continuing that subdued, barely visible color shit that they've had on the iPad minis for a while. So it comes in a blue, a purple, and of course the starlight, and I believe it's still space gray, right? Yeah. So these colors are not great. I would probably just say get space gray. Like the blue is very neutral. It almost looks silverish. So in a way it looks more silver than like, of course, the replacement for silver, which is starlight. I never liked starlight. I think it has this like pistone like mood to it where it doesn't really improve like anything upon silver, nor is it as vibrant as like a real gold or rose gold. And we know Apple agrees with that because when you actually look at, for example, the iPad Air, they do not have the same colors anymore. Let's look. What does Apple have here for the iPad Air when it comes to colors? Let's buy it. Come on, Apple. You can make me buy it a little quicker, right? Oh, what? No, they still have to. Oh, no, it's the same colors. Wait, but those colors are like. Those colors are more saturated, are they not? Wait. What's up with these colors? Let me just briefly see what the iPad mini is. Like if the colors are really the same. Because that would be something that I guess I kind of slipped my mind. Blue and purple. Do those look the same to you? Yeah, they kind of do, unfortunately. And blue here is barely there. Blue here is barely there. Yep. So I guess it's only the iPhone 16 generation that really boosts colors again. Damn, I thought for a second, man, the iPad Air might have done it too, but I guess it's been a while, and all those rumors, and of course now the release of the official iPhone 16, I guess like more vibrant colors were on my mind. And like, I mean, look at this. Like, again, a lot of apple.com searches here today. Like, look at it in comparison. Why? Like, I know that, of course, the iPhone 16 now features like color infused glass and whatever, but look how vibrant all of that is. Like, could you imagine the iPad mini coming in that ultramarine blue color, in that teal, gorgeous green color, in that pink color? Look at it. Look how good it is. Oh God, Apple. Oh, and by the way, that's a very smooth 3D model. That's nicely integrated. I guess that's some of their experience in making fast, simplified models for AR. But yeah, look at this color. Uh, Teal. Also, I'm not a huge fan of green, but it's such a beautiful, beautiful tone of green. Pink. Again, and some people have complained that it's not like Barbie pink, but look how vibrant that is. And then this is what Apple does. Like it's barely like on a gray background because of course it's still like aluminum. You barely can pick out the colors. Like on a first look, like yeah, I would be able to say yeah, the purple, but with the blue, like barely to be honest. Like I would be like, is there even a color? Like, oh Jesus, let me know, guys. Am I crazy here? Do you think I'm like too smitten by the new iPhone 16 colors? I recently asked a friend who just got a new Galaxy S24 on her updated contract, and I was like, oh, and she was like, oh, I'm missing the green color of the S22 generation, and I was like, well, were you not smitten by the colors of the base new iPhones? And we knew that she wasn't going to get a base iPhone. That's understandable. But like, and she was like, no. And I was honestly like flabbergasted by it because I understand not wanting the iPhone itself, especially if you're already used to like a 120 hertz screen, a device with 3 cameras, shit like that, right? But like not liking these colors to me is almost blasphemous. If Apple could only put it in their heart to make a product red for the iPhone 16 generation, I think that would be incredible. But yeah, alas, for the current cheaper iPads, now we of course do have more colors to choose from than on the iPad Pros, where Apple kind of believes that fun goes to die and that you don't deserve fun colors over there. But yeah, space gray, really, guys, don't buy Starlight. You won't like how it looks. It's not gold, it's not silver, it's somewhere in between, and not in the to make a Lord of the Rings reference again, you know how like Galadriel was like said to have like this gorgeous blonde hair that was like a mix of gold and silver from the 2 trees of Valinor, right? And it's like, no, that's not Starlight. Shut up. You're not the 2 trees from Aman. Armored Core 6 Rocks. I try to tell male customers to consider the iPhone 16 instead of the Pros. After they look at the ultramarine and the pink, they just stare at me and they want to swear. Yeah, I can kind of understand that. A lot of people are very close-minded, but like I really don't understand the perspective on ultramarine. I think ultramarine is a dope color. But I guess it's too vibrant, maybe, for some men. I think men have been kind of taught to only like matte black. And like, yeah, I was never like that. I love me a gorgeous blue. And I mean, like, I'm always sitting here in like some kind of dark t-shirt or dark blue shirt. So I guess I'm not too much to judge those men. But when it comes to phones, I like me a fun color. We only have pink and ultramarine as the iPhone 16 demo. So yeah, that will depend on the store. But yeah, I guess Apple is just going the boys and girls route in your store, right? Blues for the boys, pink for the girls. Um, 14 Pro was the best color ever for you, Armored Core 6. Right? You take that back. Take that back when Sierra Blue and Titanium Blue exist. You take that back. You take the name of purple out of your mouth. Riveting Tail Chap, welcome to the chat, brother. I wish A18 was an iPad. Well, the question is, what A18 are you talking about? The problem is, we now know, of course, that A18 and A18 Pro are different dies. Are we talking about the A18 with 5 GPU cores and stuff like that? Because at that point, in some scenarios, you would be at the same performance level, except for single core. Well, yeah, multi-core is also better, but you have a lot less cache on the regular A17, on the regular A18. You have faster memory, so that helps. But I assume Apple really wanted to double down on the logistics for their 6400 megatransfers memory from the A17 Pro. I understand what you mean, like regular variant A. The problem is regular variant A18 wouldn't even be giving you everything that the A17 Pro can give you, because, for example, the faster USB-C controller, that's something that is innate to the Pro A series models. So with how Apple is differentiating A18 and A18 Pro, I understand that A18 Pro is probably too precious right now. I mean, it's an N3E. It goes into the iPhone Pro models, stuff like that. At some point, who knows? Apple might make a very small upgrade to the iPad Mini in the future. Just give it the A18 Pro versus the A17 Pro, but also like finally give us a larger screen update. So again, this is not the year where we are getting a crazy uplift in everything, because again, double the storage, double the RAM at same price. You kind of have to take what you can get in that regard. Yeah, I know people like the purple on the 14 Pro. I didn't like it, but I won't throw you guys from the roof for that, of course. Let's continue. Now we have the colors behind us. So what exactly is Apple advertising? 30% boost on CPU performance. Let's look at that. Let's look at Geekbench 6. By the way, guys, if you are on like the beta updates, I highly recommend updating to the latest iOS 18.1 beta 7 that just launched yesterday, because it boosts. Like, I got my fastest ever multi-core result on my M1 iPad Pro over 8500, and I got my fastest ever multi-core result on my A17 Pro iPhone 15 Pro Max over 7500, and I also got very close to 3000 points in single core there. So some very nice, like, I don't know what Apple did to do that, but it did. Yeah, browser. Let's look at that. Where's iOS? Yeah, Apple Pencil Pro 2, true. It's all like, it required at least some redesigning, right? It required like slightly newer magnets and connectivity stuff there. Yeah, it makes sense. So let's look at single core A15 here, 2300. So that goes up from 2300 to somewhere around 2900 to 3000, knowing my own results from the A17 Pro. It's funny, this is the result I got from the M1, which makes sense because the A15 is very much like the A14 but higher clocked, and the M1 was higher clocked than the A14. So yeah, just small observations based on my own experience here. But yep, that's about a 30% uplift. Could actually be a little more. We don't know how well Apple, we know, for example, that the iPad mini in terms of graphics performs much better than A15 iPhones, and that's because with its larger chassis, it's all aluminum unibody design, it has a lot more room to dissipate heat. With, of course, like something like the iPhone 13 Pro, that just simply wasn't the case with its stainless steel and glass construction construction. So we should probably still see the iPad mini actually, in my expectations, in many ways outperform the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. Maybe not as much in CPU performance, but I would definitely argue in GPU performance, in real world results in games. Then in multi-core, we will be going from 5700 to like what here it's 7200. I have measured, of course, 7560 or something like that just yesterday. So let's see. And yeah, Armored Core, believe me, like iPad mini upgrades are not based on what Tylosive Tech asks from Tim Cook. It's not based on anything the community like asks for in like individual cases. It's always based, like Apple does surveys, and of course just the fact Apple now builds the Apple Pencil Pro, they sell it at the same price as the Apple Pencil 2, so of course they want to sell more of those. So every device was what supported Apple Pencil 2 was eventually gonna get Apple Pencil Pro. That's just like, that's common sense. Of course, if you are coming now from an iPad where you already used Apple Pencil 2, now you're kind of in a bit of a conundrum. Like now you would have to spend money extra, hopefully find somebody who would buy that Apple Pencil 2 from you. But nice uplift also in multi-core from 5700 to 7200. That's just the Geekbench results. We of course know that it can perform better. Can Stage Manager please go away? There it is. So 7200 divided by 5700. That's 26%. And if we take my result from yesterday, even just dumb it down a little to 7,500, that's a 32% uplift. So definitely worthwhile. And yes, I was controlling my iPad with my mouse on the side here. Guys, we've been streaming for about half an hour. Small shout out for all of you to do the YouTube jazz, as I call it, subscribing to the channel, liking the video, sharing it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. And you can see I love interacting with you in the live chat. Hello to Rosa too. And of course, if you want to support me directly, leave a small donation in the form of a super chat or super sticker. You can see how Max Maximus did it here. You can become a channel member right here on YouTube. Shout out to Angelica and Max Maximus, who are Mark Check Pro Max channel members. And you can also become a supporter over on Patreon. Yeah, so Apple's 30% uplift claims in the CPU department definitely line up with what we have gotten in the past with other A17 Pro versus other A15 devices. Let's continue. A 25% jump in GPU. It depends a little bit if you are limited by some things. Like here, there will be an uplift in memory bandwidth because we're looking at like not 6400. We're now jumping to 6400 from, I believe, like 4400 or whatever that last spec was that Apple was keeping for a very long time up until the A15. So you're definitely not like limited here with an upgrade in terms of memory bandwidth. But the A16 in between the A15 and the A17 Pro was not a large uplift. It had more memory bandwidth, but its GPU architecture was largely the same. It has a 5-core GPU, so that puts it more in line with like the non-Pro A18 chip. But of course, that's the A17 Pro, so it does have some Pro stuff in there that, of course, the base A18 doesn't have. Then there's like all the support for newer features that includes hardware accelerated ray tracing. I was surprised to see software-based ray tracing, but it means it's 4 times faster than software-based ray tracing. It supports dynamic caching and hardware accelerated mesh shading. So those are newer GPU generation features. Will make it more performant in optimized games. Mesh shading is like a weird thing, like even on desktop, where we of course have had like mesh shading support on like NVIDIA architectures for years and years, like because like developers still target even back to like the GTX 10 series, like a lot of games still don't really take too much advantage of it, so I cannot promise you just how big the performance uplift is going to be. Apple once again fails to mention here MetalFX AI-based upscaling using the faster neural engine. Apple basically mentioned it on the A17 Pro for the iPhone 15 Pro, and then it came to games, like very few games like Genshin Impact, never to be seen or talked about again. So I have no idea what is happening here. But definitely, like, shout out to Dame Tech, a channel that we have mentioned quite a lot in the past here. I really hope he gets the new iPad mini. I would love to see comparisons with last gen. I would love to see comparison with the iPhone 15 Pro, of course. I know it's hard to match like resolution, especially across those devices, but given that this device is likely going to be able to boost up to like 8 watts of power consumption instead of the 5 to 6 watts, or sometimes even lower on the 15 Pro, I assume it will have really good results. And unlike, for example, the iPad Air or the especially like the larger 13-inch models, it won't need to necessarily give you like really high resolution. So in that regard, if you can just max out 60 hertz, you're probably having a very good experience here. Yes, it's not going to be a game-changing experience. You guys see what I did there, but it is going to be a very nice experience. Of course, don't buy the iPad mini for gaming. That's my point. But just enjoy that it has better gaming capabilities too. Then Apple keeps talking about Apple Intelligence coming with iPadOS 18.1. Nothing too surprising here, of course. Then it actually gets more interesting because, yes, the new iPad mini does support Wi Fi 6E and Bluetooth 5.3. So, in that regard, it does match now the iPad Air that was introduced and actually the iPad Pro. So, that leaves kind of only the iPhone 16 generation now that has Wi Fi 7 support. Now, of course, we don't really expect that from a cheaper iPad mini, but it's now funny to have like this really expensive iPad Pro in the lineup that was still introduced this year have an inferior Wi-Fi technology to the latest iPhones, even the base iPhones, not just the Pros. It has support for Wi-Fi plus cellular, 5G, of course. They do not mention if 5G is in any way faster, if it has a new modem. Maybe it does. I mean, it probably does given the long wait, but I would argue it most likely doesn't have the absolute latest like X75 modem that we find in the iPhone 16 Pros. But maybe like an X70, maybe an X65, who knows. All devices are eSIM, so that's a big applause for me because I have notoriously said I want Apple to just optimize the shit out of internal space and cost and reduce ingress points for water and reduce breaking points, especially in super thin devices. So that's now eSIM. Apple calls it a more secure alternative to a physical SIM card. So full support here from me and there, matching what like the iPad Air has now been doing. Of course, it also reduces like Apple's logistical complexity in how they design the Wi-Fi models versus the Wi-Fi plus 5G models. The USB-C port, this is what I mentioned before, and this is something that we would be missing unless Apple builds like a special extra controller, but I doubt they would do that. This is what we would be missing if it got the base A18 chip rather than the A17 Pro, and that is that it has 10 gigabits per second output, the same as on the iPhone 15 Pro and 16 Pro, and that is 2 times faster than the 5 gigabits per second that we had on the previous iPad mini. Next is a lot of words to say. It has smart HDR4. Again, without really big camera changes, you really cannot say too much here. The front-facing camera does support center stage. again, I have not been too much a fan of center stage because it uses a very wide camera for relatively low resolution and a very small sensor. So if Apple finally gave us center stage 2 and paired it with like a 24 megapixel sensor, like a larger sensor and even better optics that lets in more light, I would be more on board with it, but to me, center stage has always just resulted in like inferior quality whenever I try to just look at the iPad in a FaceTime call myself. And yes, it's mildly practical when it's maybe a call where I have two people next to me. I never have calls with 5 or 6 people in the room. So yeah, I understand that it does have its uses, but it's not really to me. And when it comes to not the iPad Mini itself, but to its accessories, it does support the Apple Pencil Pro and, of course, the cheap USB-C Apple Pencil. With Apple Pencil Pro, you can squeeze, you can have like that barrel rotation stuff. All those features that, of course, build upon what the Apple Pencil 2 was already capable of, even stuff like Find My. But we just know, of course, there are slightly different magnets in there to support Apple Pencil Pro, and they didn't move the camera in the way they did on the iPad Air and the iPad Pro. I wish they could kind of like made the bezels thinner, given that the bezels are relatively thick for how small the screen is. I also don't think that this design needs like accidental touch input like detection as well as like an iPad Air or an iPad Pro. So maybe reducing them just by 20% would have been a nice thing. But I kind of assume that will be coming when the iPad Mini gets updated to OLED, because we are rumored to be getting an OLED iPad Air and iPad Mini, still probably on 60 hertz. So that's not too great. But it is going to be like Apple will, for of course, keep promotion for the Pro iPads exclusive still for a little while. But also, if the panel is not as high quality, then essentially overclocking it to support 120 hertz does impact longevity and stuff like that. So Apple might just want to avoid it here. Now, of course, we still haven't gotten that, so that's speculation for us to be excited and disappointed about at the same time in like 2 years. Then Apple keeps talking about iPadOS 18. So nothing crazy here. It is $449. Sorry, guys. But its education pricing is $449, so nice 10% discount. The Apple Pencil Pro is still $129. Barely any price reduction for like education, $119. I would hope it would be like $110, maybe $99, but alas, it's not. Apple Pencil 2, Apple Pencil USB-C is thank you, Riveting, saying bless you. Thank you so much. Is $80 or $70 for education. So nothing crazy. It's a new Smart Folio here. Smart Folio here. So no like magic keyboards or something like that. And the upgrade to a Wi-Fi plus 5G model is still at $650. YTKR saying a very disappointing update. Not even A18 or 120 Hz LCD. No bigger battery. No 4 speakers. They could have given 1 or 2 of those. Sorry. Let me quickly correct what I just did on my iPhone, and then I'll respond to you in detail. So, why do I somewhat agree and somewhat disagree with that? Well, for one, $500 is not a super small price, right? And I mean, like, of course, we do have the iPad Air, right? So we do know of its capabilities. It doesn't have 120 hertz. It doesn't have a quad speaker system, and it's of course a much larger device, so it would have been more easily capable of supporting that. It has an M2 chip, which will give you more multi-core performance than the iPad Mini, but it will actually give you inferior single-core performance and inferior neural engine performance. Of course, the camera setup's very similar here. Apple Pencil Pro support. We do have also 128 gigabytes of base storage and 8 gigabytes of memory. And you just have to understand that when it comes to like comparing to the previous generation, it jumps 2 generations of chips, and it jumps to a good A17 Pro. So there's no binning here or anything like that, even utilizing some of its features like 10 gigabits per second output. I would have liked to see 120 hertz, like the non mini LED kind. Yes, I think that it would be especially nice given the jelly scrolling issues in previous years. From rumors in the past, we suspect that Apple changed the internal orientation to reduce the jelly scrolling in portrait mode. Whether or not it now means it will now be an issue in landscape mode, I really couldn't tell you, to be honest. I didn't perceive it too much, but of course, it's still a 60 hertz LCD. So now that maybe more people are coming potentially from a super super fast response time OLED, like a tandem OLED iPad Pro, I understand that there is a wish here that, you know what, you could have at least given us OLED or a 120 hertz LCD display. I kind of understand that. Now, with the quad speakers, I kind of disagree because I honestly don't see Apple doing that before they redesign the iPad. And YTKR, I honestly, I have to stop you here for a little bit. Like, you're bringing up devices like the Honor Magic Pad 2 or the Red Magic Pad. This iPad is not designed to be sold for $500, nor is it competing with Android devices that are desperately trying to be sold at all. This is market power. This is power where it has nothing to do with, well, bigger displays. For bigger displays, get, of course, the iPad Air for just $100 more. But to me, this comparison with other devices, at that point, if you're truly seeking that kind of value, then you should be getting one of those devices. You have to vote with your wallet. This is my conundrum with people, with especially in like the GPU market, which I know I don't talk too much on this channel, but I feel like when Nvidia prices something outrageously, people are always like, you know what, I hope AMD comes in, kicks their butt, gives us such a better deal, right? And then AMD actually comes out and brings out, for example, the 7800 XT, right, with a 16 gigabyte card at $500, very performant when it comes to rasterization, not too great when it comes to ray tracing, but still gives you a lot more than what Nvidia offers you at $500. And then Nvidia lowers the price from their like $600 or $700 device by $50, and people are like, yay, competition, and they just rush out and buy Nvidia again. And YTKR, I understand you're attached to iOS, but that is the power of your attachment. It's that power of your attachment that allows Apple to charge these prices. Can it run an FCP? I don't know. I like A7, like FCP was never ported to iPhone, but that's probably also a display thing, Matthew. But the performance, the RAM would be there, of course, with if M1 can run FCP on iPad, then A17 Pro, which is basically like match fast in single core performance, almost matches it in multi-core performance. In terms of bandwidth, it's still a little slower, even though it uses faster memory, but it has half the bus width. It could get FCP, but I don't I mean, command find, Final Cut. No. I assume if it I assume if it was there, Apple would have advertised it. To be honest, like I don't see why they wouldn't have talked about it. It could be that Apple announces like a port, basically not like a special FCP version that comes to the iPad Mini, but just FCP coming to the iPad Mini in general. But it doesn't seem like a thing for now. That's unfortunate. What's your true opinion? Keep the name Apple outside this, but for real, shouldn't they at least give all devices 120 hertz and OLED? Not 120 hertz and OLED, but either one, in my opinion. Like 120. Like I think people misunderstand Apple's unwillingness to give 120 hertz to OLEDs, to cheaper OLEDs, and that's because Apple doesn't really believe in ProMotion without they don't. ProMotion consists of two things. A lot of people just reduce it to 120 hertz, but it's not just 120 hertz, it's also variable refresh rate, right? And LTPO, which is not just an OLED technology. For example, the ProMotion screens inside iPads and Macs are actually LTPO. Apple actually invented LTPO together with LG, especially the LCD version. But it just so happens that with this iPad, I would have loved to see a proper ProMotion LCD screen, similar to what we had since the 2017 iPad Pro, even, and of course since the redesigned 2018 iPad Pro. I understand. I understand you are asking for single layer OLED, not for tandem OLED. I understand you are not insane. That's clear to me. Matthew, for one, an answer to you. Yeah, it will guarantee to run LumaFusion. LumaFusion is even iPhone optimized and even optimized for older stuff. I myself have a LumaFusion on my older devices. Yeah, there's no problem with LumaFusion here. But my issue is that, of course, given the existence of the iPad Air and the logistics there, Apple still wants to have a high profit margin. And there are things here that are hard to compare with some of the Android competitors, right? We're talking about dual speaker versus quad speaker, but then you actually listen to the speakers, and that dual speaker kind of sounds very nice anyway, right? And I understand it. For example, like that OnePlus tablet, it's what is it, $600, and I believe it comes with like the Gen 3. It comes with I believe a quad speaker system. It comes with 120 hertz LCD panel, right? But one that gets like really bright. So I'm not even denying that the value can be there in the competition. And I hope that this iPad Mini doesn't sell too crazy. But the problem is that when the iPad Mini doesn't sell too crazy, you know what Apple does? They just keep selling it for longer to get rid of the inventory. They don't really see that as an incentive to crazily boost value in the way they would if, for example, an iPhone generation completely failed, right? If an iPhone generation, if like 60% feedback was like, man, that really isn't a great deal for my buck, right? Apple would still work on that. Like they're used to like 95% plus customer satisfaction. If people really felt like they were getting ripped off, Apple would change that with next generation. But with the iPad Mini, it's a niche product. It's a hobby at best for Apple. The reason why it can even exist, because it's not like a huge seller by itself, it's because it's getting like, I don't want to use sloppy seconds. That's a bad word. It's getting not rising tide lifts all boats. What is a second when you benefit from somebody? Trickle down. It gets trickle down hardware from better selling, more expensive iPads down the road, and every 2 or 3 years, Apple stands up from their ass, and offers us a new iPad Mini. Matthew, iPad Mini Pro is a miss, but this is cool. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I would have loved the $700 iPad Mini like this with like a tandem OLED screen and an A18 Pro. I think that would have been great. It can run Procreate and Procreate Dreams, you think? Yeah, of course. Like, is Procreate Dreams exclusive to any like M series iPad? Like I thought Procreate Dreams just worked, just slower in older iPads. I can check it for you. Procreate Dreams. Does it say? How much is my iPad compatible? Here, those are the iPads compatible. iPad Pro 11 inch second generation. That's the A12X version, right? That's the A12Z version. Show all devices. Oh yeah, it supports of course a ton of stuff. Like I mean, it supports like the A9X iPad Pro 9.7 inch. Does it support like yeah, and it supports the iPad Mini. Yeah, yeah, it is. Um, Oh, so yeah, it will be automatically supported here. Hope that helps, Matthew. And yeah, regular Procreate has like even easier compatibility. YTKR, in my opinion, they used A17 Pro because the leftovers. Yep, that's absolutely correct. I believe I wanted to say that in the beginning, but then it skipped my mind. Thank you for mentioning that. Still making N3B. I don't know if they're even still making the A17 Pro or if they just have some stuff over basically because at some point they stopped producing iPhone 15 Pro and 15 Pro Max models because they of course were getting ready to get into the iPhone 16 generation. So yeah, on that I absolutely agree, YT. Ross Young said no under display Face ID for the 17 Pro, sadly. Also leak says no 12 gigabytes or 2. No, that's not what the leak said. The leak said 12 gigabytes and 2 nanometer for iPhone 18 series. It actually said that 12 gigabytes would be coming to the entire iPhone 18 series. So my suspicion is it means that we are getting 12 gigabytes on the iPhone 17 Pro family, keeping 8 gigabytes on the base iPhone 17 and whatever the 17 Air becomes. And beyond that, we are getting 12 gigabytes and N3P based chip on the 17 Pros. Maybe we get N3P across the entire lineup. Maybe we get an A19 Pro and an A19 the same way we just got A18 and A18 Pro. But yeah, that will be interesting to see. Matthew, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for joining. And whenever you guys need my help, I mean, I'm here just on my device, so I can do some quick searches. It helps me as well because I do not use these apps, so learning about that is always a help. But YTKR, because you mentioned it, and because we're kind of finished with the exact promises of the iPad mini here, let's actually go to 95Mac and see what some of the latest rumors are that we can talk about. Now, of course, iPad mini is the big thing today. Let's see if we missed any of the smaller updates. So we have the same amount of CPU and GPU cores, but we do have double the memory, double the storage. If you are somebody who were looking forward to getting 256 gigabytes, that is $50 cheaper than it was before. The same kind of display with the same peak brightness. Again, still a question about stuff like jelly scrolling changes. Do I think they're gonna skip the iPhone 19 like they did the iPhone 9? The problem with the iPhone 10 was that the iPhone 10 had the redesign to justify the different branding, right? They didn't just call it iPhone 10 for fun, right? They jumped, like, I mean, they didn't even skip the iPhone 9 in a way. They just completely arbitrarily said like iPhone 8 and iPhone 10. The 10 was basically to say it was so good, it deserved an entire different branding exercise, right? So I don't know why, like, it's not like they dislike the number 9. I mean, I guess we'll see next year, but like I don't see it happening next year because the changes for next year are not anywhere near to what the changes were from like iPhone 7 to iPhone 10. Yeah. Apple Pencil cover is the feature. I/O with 10 gigabits per second. Wi-Fi 6E here. Faster Bluetooth. New Apple Pencil Pro or USB-C support. We talk about some of the camera changes with now Smart HDR4. Front camera still like center stage. Again, not my biggest like here, we talked about the colors, the dimensions are about the same. Yep, they're actually exactly the same, even the weight. And we've talked about the value proposition of the higher storage, higher memory. Yeah, so we didn't miss anything here. Relay already getting ready, saying 2 nanometer talk time. Yeah, kind of is. Guys, we've been streaming for almost an hour. Small shout out again to do all the YouTube jazz, as we call it around here. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, share it out to anybody who you think might enjoy it. Comment live. You see, I love interacting with you guys. Please consider leaving a small donation in the form of a super chat or a super sticker. Consider becoming a channel member right here on YouTube or a supporter over on Patreon. 95 Mac. So let's see the 2 nanometer rumor. Or was it on Mac rumors? There it is. This is coming from Weibo user, mobile phone chip expert. This is a guy who has predicted not too much in the past, but was usually correct. Now, he does say, what is it? The A20 will adopt a new packaging method. I don't know how much that means. APTS, he also does say just iPhone. He doesn't say specifically like Pro models or anything. APTS has been changed from the original info to the WMCM packaging method. Again, I should probably read up on all the TSMC different packaging stuff because it will become increasingly more relevant as, of course, it's becoming more and more difficult to shrink transistors. So efficiency, power gains, better heat distribution will just have to come from other improvements. The 11-inch iPad Pro got 600 milliamp hours increase while reduced the thickness. Why did they increase it on the iPad mini? It has like, I can actually tell you easily why it matters, and that is why they wouldn't do so, and that is the iPad mini actually jumps to a much more efficient chip from A15, which is N5P based, to an N3B chip, while the iPad Air just moved from an M1 chip to an now we're talking about iPad Pro. The iPad Pro jumped from M2 to M4. Sorry, I thought you were talking about the iPad Air. Well, no, but now that's unfair because the 11-inch iPad Pro got an increase in capacity, but the 13-inch iPad Pro actually got a reduction. So you cannot really compare that. They also had drastic changes to their screen technology. The 13-inch iPad was mini LED, so that change to OLED was like doubly more efficient. The 11-inch iPad Pro just had a regular LCD promotion screen, so that change to tandem OLED was big, but it never had those incredible peak brightness levels, for example, like mini LED and the tandem OLED does. So it kind of could have used a small boost in battery capacity for those specific use cases. Yeah, so it's really hard to say from device to device. I mean, like real life battery like could have changed. Why TKR? I think you're misunderstanding. I absolutely understand that more hardware, more better, and more value, more better. Believe me, I think of all those things myself. But the reason why Apple can do that is because, for one, the iPad mini does not have a lot of competition. Right? The people who might be looking at like an 8-inch Android tablet, they're not looking at the iPad mini anyway. And if they did, then Apple would have had to change the iPad mini internal so much that it would just kill their profit margins. And at that point, they would care even less about the iPad mini. So that's the difference, in my opinion. Like, it's just like very individual choices from one gen to the next gen. One gets a huge screen change, the other doesn't. One gets a 2-generation chip upgrade, like on the iPad Pros, then the iPad Airs get a 1-generation chip upgrade. Like, it's really hard to say, oh, they should do this because they did that over there. Well, Does Apple make like $400 of profit per iPad mini? No. So you can get why they would pay less attention to it than to the iPad Pro. Again, it's not an excuse, it's an explanation. I think I had that talk with somebody on this channel already where some people were like, oh, that's just an excuse. No, it's an explanation. So 820, Relay, you're asking backside power delivery? No, backside power delivery is not coming in 2 nanometer. It's coming in, I believe, in A16. I believe they stripped that like a year or two ago from the specifications of 20A. It's so funny because A20 will be 2 nanometer, and 2 nanometer would technically be 20A because it's followed by like 16A or A16. I even forget the branding at this point. Yeah, so you would have to like really do some some mind jogging here. Like it gets really complicated to keep up. What is the name of the chip? What is the name of the node? Armored Core 6 Rock saying iPad mini and iPhone SE4 good enough for most people. I would say iPad mini, no, because it depends on your use case. Like, I know most people still see iPad as at least somewhat of a productivity focused device. So I would probably say more like the iPad Air. iPhone SE4, good enough for most people? Yeah. It is, in a way that like we objectively don't need much more than that, but whether or not it's a good value for you or you just cannot live without promotion, that's entirely personal. Yeah, Armored Cores. I understood you were talking about like the new 6.1-inch OLED iPhone SE coming sometime early next year. YT, so basically Apple using their name and loyal customers so they don't bother innovate. This is my view and yours. Nope, it's not my view and yours. The problem is Apple isn't using their name here or even like their loyal customer base. It's using basically the lack of competition on that side of like the iPad mini. Like, because look at what they are doing with the iPad Pro, like with the freaking tandem OLED, M4 and stuff like that. Who else is doing shit like that? Consider what speaker quality they're getting out of like 5mm thick products. My thing is that whenever we enthusiasts talk about cheaper devices, we tend to project needs that we have from our Airs and Pro devices and even like Pro Max and devices, and we tend to project those needs onto those cheaper products. And when we actually ask those people, for example, Dave from iCave Dave, like he loves his iPad mini, and I was talked to him and I was like, do you want it to get like 120 hertz? Do you need it to get OLED or something like that? And he was like, no, like he barely sees 120 hertz. He doesn't care about like the contrast of OLED when it comes to like the iPad mini. And because those people like, and I don't mean like Dave is like not being informed, he obviously knows tech, but like because some people don't even perceive this stuff, they would never even think about that stuff. Apple doesn't bother to bring that stuff, and it has nothing to do with like resting on their laurels or resting on their name. It has everything to do with the fact that I think if Android had created the same kind of competitive structures in tablets as they did with iOS, like with iPhones basically, I think Apple would feel a stronger need to give us low prices. I mean, don't forget, the iPad, the base iPad, the A14 iPad jumped from $450 down to $350. Where else do you get those kinds of like value increases and price reductions from Apple? And I would argue that's because in that $300 to $500 price range of like education focused devices, tablets that people buy first for their little kids and stuff like that, but still bigger devices, right? Like 10, 11 inches, because people might want to use that iPad themselves. I know that because like my cousin has 3 kids. I bought basically all of them like in a small iPad at some point. But I know, of course, the mom and dad still will use those iPads too until the day that they got their own iPads because they got used to that. None of that ever involved an iPad mini. Like, no person I ever asked was like, oh, I was like, would you rather get like an iPad mini? It's technically a little more expensive, but it like has better features. And those people were like, no, like I want just the cheapest possible iPad that is still a nice iPad. Um, YTKR, Samsung is doing the same thing as Apple because most Chinese phones aren't available worldwide. Yeah, I actually like I covered that in my yesterday's live stream when we talked about the Vivo devices. I still think that people misunderstand like raw capabilities of devices. Like they just tend to focus on like amount of storage, amount of memory, and stuff like that. But they ignore stuff like speaker quality. For example, we looked at like tech tablets 24-hour review of the Vivo X200 Pro, and the speakers really sounded bad. Like I know he gave the Vivo and the Samsung the edge over the iPhone in microphones, which to me was completely ridiculous, but usually microphones is then also an area that struggles. Haptics, for years Apple has been the only player to actually take haptics even remotely serious. Then Pixels came along. Samsung basically had haptics only for like their software home button for a while, and then they also boosted their game. OnePlus then created like a new linear accurate accelerator, whatever, to make it a very good haptic feedback device. And it took a while, and it showed that Apple had different focal points than other companies, similar to even silly stuff like waterproofing, where like, yeah, those companies might have the same IP68 rating, but for years, when you actually threw in an iPhone in the water, even before it got like IP67, for example, it actually survived longer than other competitors. It obviously sucked in comparison to like military grade like phones and shit like that, but it punched above its weight grade. And then there are individual features that companies didn't really bother that much with, that Apple doesn't bother with anymore, unfortunately. Stuff like 3D touch, right, on the iPhone 6S. I think that was a phenomenal feature, but guess what that feature did? It added thickness to the display, so it took up internal space that could have been used for other stuff. Of course, it had its own cost as well, but it just wasn't stuff that nicely showed up in like in the spec sheet. Of course, like I believe, was it Oppo or was it Vivo or Xiaomi or whoever who said that like we have like a 6% profit margin on our hardware, right? So of course you get either lower prices or you get more storage, more RAM, stuff like that on their devices, while Apple has like a 35% profit margin on their hardware and like a 70% profit margin on their software, which is still nothing to like the 80% margin that Microsoft has on their software. But yeah, that's the power of branding, and that's the power of branding everywhere. It's the power of branding that I told you guys with GPUs, where people will hope that AMD launches a competitive GPU, not so that they can actually go out and buy an AMD thing, but then they just get an NVIDIA GPU for a little bit cheaper. And fundamentally, they kill profit margins for AMD that way, and now AMD is about to launch RDNA 4 without a high-end GPU in the lineup, because they're like, guys, we don't even know if we have demand for it, so we just designed two like SKUs of the die. Maybe you enjoy it, who knows? We are getting basically more money from the guaranteed sales of PlayStations. That's the unfortunate reality of trying to always push pricing down. At some point, it just comes back. And we talk about like those Chinese phones, but if you watched my yesterday's video, I covered, for example, and my God, Color OS name drop animation or something like that. Videos. Like I saved that on Twitter. Let me give me guys a second. just cover up the screen so you don't see all my login shit, because I unfortunately cannot use the X app. It has been crushing on my Mac ever since the last update. So I'll just want to show you that. No, I don't want it to open it in X. Stop asking me 5 times in a row. Sign in. Sign in complete. New Beats collaboration with Kim Kardashian. That's glorious. All bookmarks. There it is. So let me show you my screen again. Here, this is the stuff that you get from when, unfortunately, you don't have really good oversight. We don't need sound for this. This is when you just demand companies like compete on like RAM and storage amount and whatever screen they use. Then you get shit like that. Oh, blatant theft. I hate this so much. And it's not just this. We've talked about like them copying essentially the capture button. Okay, the camera control stuff, like 1-to-1, even to like the swipe controls and shit like that. Of course, these companies can live with a lower profit margin if they basically never invest in their own software design and they can just copy. Really, everyone else doesn't control the software. Then we get Tensor. Yeah, that's an unfortunate reality of like the Android stuff. I wish that Google had like a little bit more influence. The only way Android can do the same as Apple is if Google steps up and make a bunch of products. Yeah, for example, back in the day, which one was it? That was an Android device that truly appealed to me. The Nexus 7. Like, I don't know if you guys remember it. Like, like there was like a second gen, never like a third gen. But like for 2012, I think this was a really good product. And I think it did what the iPad mini is kind of doing, which is it was a one-handed device. Now, it's a 7-inch screen, as the 7 in Nexus 7 suggests. So these days, its market share would be completely eaten up by smartphones. But I was really impressed back in the day. If Google had kept making hardware like this to actually compete with stuff like the iPad mini, and these days we would have like a Nexus 8 with a slightly different aspect ratio, maybe not full the iPad's 4:3, but maybe 3:2. Maybe it would have it the same, maybe it would be $400 instead of the iPad mini's $500, but it would have like an OLED screen at that price, right? It might not have the same single core performance as the A17 Pro, but by utilizing maybe a Snapdragon 8S Gen 3, right? The smaller variant, it would still have like a decent battery life and stuff like that. And it would even support like a few AI features right on device. This is the kind of competition I want to see. I know YTKR, you mentioned stuff like the Honor Magic Pad and stuff like that, but honestly, that is more competition to the iPad Air. And once we do that, now we finally we come to a crossroads, because the even bigger differentiator between like storage, RAM amount, whatever display they use, is actually what software they run. You yourself said you are impartial to iOS and would like iPad OS basically on your tablet, but also people get used to stuff even like Pages, Keynote, and Numbers. People have their stuff in iCloud. People have people want to use the FCP, the iPad version of Final Cut, and obviously GarageBand, iMovie for like cheaper alternatives. But even like what is the premium version? Logic. Yeah, so this is the difference, and for most people, software is a bigger value point than hardware. That's maybe to us as enthusiasts, that's kind of unfortunate, but it's just the truth. YTKR, let's see Apple in 2025. Now they have computation in all departments. I don't know what you mean. Could you rephrase that? Matthew saying, are there any YouTubers who have an actual review unit for the new iPad? I assume they do, but you don't get the reviews today. The iPad itself only launches next Wednesday, so I would expect maybe the review embargo to lift like maybe next Monday or something like that. It also, of course, depends if Apple now starts launching like new products every day, and maybe tomorrow we are getting the M4 MacBook Pro announced, or maybe the M4 Mac Mini, right? That could also impact like when review embargoes drop and stuff like that. It's funny how PlayStation gets backlash for the price of the Pro, but they put a $30 30th anniversary cover and it sells out instantly. Yeah, I wanted to buy the 30th anniversary version, but it was just like completely gone the second I joined. Yeah, and I bought the Pro, and I think the Pro is great. I think when it comes to the packaging of the Pro, because I know most people would probably want to use it with like a disk drive. I don't, but most people. So, and that's here in Europe, that's 120 euros extra. And then when you add like the $30 silly, you know what? I can actually give you that. Let me give you that for a second. Here is my stand for my PlayStation 5 Pro that will come early next month. And there is some other stuff included, but yeah, I paid like $30 for that. And of course, it cost them like what? $1.50 to produce. But they can do that because it's an official accessory, and to me it's not like, oh, the value of the $30 accessory. To me, it's the value of the 830 euro package, right, which isn't too much of a difference, versus 800 euros, which is what I paid for the PS5 Pro itself. So yeah, Apple is not the only one who can sell you like trinkets and shit like that. And that is what value means. Like the value of like your chosen platform, your chosen ecosystem, in a way your chosen brand. Sure, like it impacts you, and it goes back to also simple stuff. Like, for example, you buy like a football jersey from your favorite team, and at that point you might completely overpay. Like, I have a friend who is like a fan of football, so we gifted him a football ball. And it was outrageously expensive because it was signed by one of his favorite players. And yes, of course, that's different than a utilitarian product like a tablet, but there is still a degree of emotionality attached to it. And I think downplaying it and always saying, oh, it's just resting on their laurels, just resting on their name, it ignores a little bit of like human mentality, in my opinion. So let's get back to the actually 2 nanometer rumor. While I bring that up, you guys can keep doing all the YouTube jazz stuff, liking, sharing, supporting, commenting, small donating, of course, becoming channel members, becoming Patreon supporters, all that fun stuff. But yeah, Minchi Kuo said that the iPhone 17 Pro Max would get 12 gigabytes next year. Apparently it wouldn't apply to the 17 Pro. He also said the Pro Max might have a vapor chamber heatsink but he didn't actually say like he had sources for that. He basically implied that because AI tasks would increase, and with 12 gigabytes, Apple could run like larger LLMs and more demanding software on the 17 Pro Max, that would basically justify it getting a vapor chamber. But we don't know if that's actually like a cohesive rumor that he actually heard from somebody reputable. Matthew saying, speaking of games, do you think Nintendo will announce the Switch 2 this fall? if they would want to launch it in April, I could see them though. I've talked about that with a friend. I could see them announcing it actually in January. I know that would be like the smallest gap between announcing a product and actually launching it, but I could see Nintendo waiting for after the holiday season so they don't compromise their basically last good chance at selling you a Switch 1. But everything in me screams that the more traditional way would be kind of talking about it somewhere in at the end of November so that people can just like adjust to it in a way for a month or two, and then like at the end of January and the beginning of February they give you like another event giving you now all the details, and then they launch it in April. But Nintendo will change as times change, and when Apple can like launch iPads and then release them, of course, to people in a week, then Nintendo can launch their new console over the course of 4 months rather than 6. YT, successful brands or celebrities always use their name to get every single money. That's absolutely correct. Even if it's not in the market. But that's the point. It is in the market because that's also a market. It's a different market. And I always try to tell people, like, it's unfortunate that Apple can kind of stand a little bit above the market. Like, I would argue that with iPhones less so than with iPads. With Macs, probably depending on which configuration you are talking about, like whether we're talking Air or Pro, or even like MacBook Pro with an M Pro chip or an M Max chip, right? Maybe at the absolute highest end, in a way, Apple has actually less competition because who else builds like SoCs that are this powerful? Like if you wanted something this or more powerful, you would have to get like an RTX 4080 mobile or above, and at that point you're using like 3 times more energy, and yeah. So again, very different considerations. I would argue that the fact that the iPhone Pro hasn't actually increased in price, except for the kind of storage trick that Apple played on the iPhone 15 Pro Max, I would argue that's and that $999 starting price has stayed with us since 2017 and the iPhone 10. I would argue that's a sign of the iPhone having stronger competition than a lot of other Apple's like sub brands in a way. Yeah, but still, I understand your point. YTKR, I think you're mistaking my explanation for why Apple can do it with an excuse, but I also do not think that it's just a branding thing. I think that if Apple from one day to the next got rid of iOS and iPadOS and just replaced it with some version of Android, if they kept making even like iOS and iPadOS, but for some reason they started using like a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3, Gen 4 chip whatsoever, and suddenly it was priced completely differently than devices with this chip or with this version of Android, that would matter, in my opinion. That would create more competition, or at least it would put Apple into a market with more competition. But because they do make their own stuff, they still are kind of the ones most focused on making like a pretty tablet, right? They have, of course, like their familiarity with iOS, iPadOS. People are used to their devices being very instantly responded. Like, don't forget, when we actually look at the benchmarks here, I know that single core is important. I know that there are other factors, memory and storage speed. When we actually just look at single core for the A15, right, you'll find that this is like a 2200, almost like 2300 single core result. That is faster than the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 that launched last year. That one gives you about 2180 or something like that. So more like this result, right? So again, not trying to downplay what that Apple has, not trying to say that Apple has like unlimited ability to just price their devices however they want, but they do have more freedoms than other brands. Samsung has more freedoms than most Chinese brands, and most Chinese brands, they aren't even impacted by the fact that like, oh, the market is so hyper competitive. It's the fact that the most brands basically do the same stuff. Like when you even look at the latest Vivo and the latest Oppo and the latest OnePlus, they all and I guess that makes sense for Oppo and OnePlus because they're part of one brand. But like, and previously Vivo and Oppo were part of one brand. You can even see that they have the same camera design on the back with that circle. And yeah, it's like nobody does crazy shit and invents completely new technology. That's not actually innovation. They just are slightly more aggressive at buying parts of the shelf and pricing them a little lower than the rest. That's how it works. They do not give you magic innovation. I would argue that, for example, the battery increase on the latest Vivo phones sounds cool. Let's see what it actually means for real world performance. Maybe their charging speeds were a nice thing, but even then they are now decreasing their peak charging speeds a little because they're prioritizing battery capacity, which in my opinion is smarter. So again, I could talk about this shit for hours, for iPhones, for iPads, for Macs, but I'm just trying to say there are a lot of factors at play. Don't try to be too reductive, or else you will end up with some absurdities at the end. I understand your points. Believe me, I would like an iPad Mini Pro 2, and I would like it to be $500 with a tandem OLED screen, like an A18 Pro and stuff like that. But that's not the market we exist in. YTKR, you'll switch your 13 battery and might wait for the 18 line up 5 generations. That will be massive. 100% support that. That what you're saying is good for the wallet. It's good for the environment. I think it also will please you more to just get that upgrade and know every single camera is newer, the screen is newer, the capabilities are better across the board. Of course, you're also jumping from like Lightning to USB-C. Even in the base 18, it might still be USB 2, but it will still be USB-C, and it will have faster charging, stuff like that, faster wireless charging too. Yeah, I absolutely support that. And even like the change from like, maybe at this point like Wi-Fi and 5G don't matter that much, because I would argue Wi-Fi 6 is probably good enough for most people. I would argue Wi-Fi 6E is probably good enough for even most enthusiasts, and Wi-Fi 7 is probably good enough for everyone forever almost. But from your device, you are getting newer modems, newer antennas, better cooling. So I fully support that. I wish I could do the same. My hands itch to just get to the newest stuff. But even this year, for example, I didn't upgrade from my 15 Pro Max to a 16 Pro Max, even though I could have. But like I was like, you know what? That would be a little wasteful. Let's just not, right? So I fully support what you describe here. Yes, but let us finally get back to the rumor. So, Weibo user, mobile phone chip expert, saying the 2nm processor A20, if it is going to be branded still that way, of the 2026 Apple iPhone will adopt a new packaging method. APTS has been changed from the original info to the WMCM packaging method. Memory will also be upgraded to 12 gigabytes, and the whole network will be announced 2 years in advance. I have no idea what the rest means. What network here? Apple chipmaker TSMC has led the way in system-on-chip technology. True, but so has Apple. Instead of using separate chip packages, yeah, we know all that stuff. That is not likely. Both iPhone 18 Pro models will get 12 gigabytes. Yeah, let's see. I still like these rumors far ahead. Like, it's really hard to say. Do I believe that by 2026 we're basically guaranteed a 2nm based processor in the iPhone? In my opinion, yes. I would hope that maybe Apple pulls a fast one on us and brings out a 2nm A19 Pro next year, but it seems like that isn't going to happen. And next year we are getting N3P. Realize saying you want to wait for 17 Pro, but the chip isn't exciting. I highly recommend not focusing too much on notes. Believe me, I do so too. It's good for the channel. But think of the architectural upgrades in the in the A18 Pro versus the A17 Pro, right? That CPU upgrade was bigger than coming from the A16, and I mean by percentages, not even in absolute numbers, from A16, which is an N4 node, or which is part of the N5 family of nodes, to the N3B node in the A17 Pro. And arguably, you even got a better efficiency improvement from from A17 Pro to A18 Pro than you got from A16 to A17 Pro. So don't focus too much on the nodes. Look at what Apple is doing with the architecture. I argue there's a decent chance that there will be a huge GPU architectural change next year. And then like maybe Apple will upgrade the CPU even more so with 2 nanometer, but you never know. It might just be like with the A17 Pro, for example, we know that Apple basically used a very similar architecture with small IPC uplifts versus A16. Now, I'm not Vadim from MaxTech. I'm not here to tell you that makes A17 or M3 or M2 or whatever stopgaps, and that you should never consider getting those devices. But I'm trying to tell you there is always something new, always something next. Get what you need, what you think really excites you. If you can stretch out your device usage for even longer, that's all the greater for you, because you save money that way, you make your upgrade even more profound. But if your hands itch and you have the money to buy it and you know it will make you at least a little happy, why not, right? YTKR, I consider the 18 Air if the 17 Air was impressive enough. Yeah, it's also interesting because we know that like the 17 series is like getting the Air model, but then supposedly the year after that we're getting Apple foldables. So that would make it a very big, slightly convoluted lineup. I don't know. I honestly don't know if the Air becomes like a staple. What if it completely fails with like just one camera, right? What if Apple upgrades it the next year and essentially just becomes a new Plus version? Yeah, but the jump to N3 is big, to N3. It's not. No, really, you're completely wrong here. TSMC, this is the problem with people like Vadim from MaxTech, who I really like in some ways, but like they really overpromise on shit. TSMC roadmap. Where is it? Does it mention the previous nodes? Here, look. N3 versus N5 is a significantly bigger leap than N3E was. Now you have to consider like these numbers look bigger, but that's because it's compared here versus N5. So that adds like 5% more, like even 4% over this. Like this is not game changing. It's the architecture that is even more impressive. But like the density arguably on N3B is more impressive than on N3E. And then yeah, the efficiency is good, but the efficiency jump of N3E versus N3B isn't larger than the jump of N3B versus N5. So yeah, it just feels to us that way because when it comes to SoC design, there is so much other stuff that impacts us. What memory is being used, the entire packaging as well, right? Even just beyond the node. What are the architectural changes? Is there more cache? Sometimes there's less cache. For example, from A15 to A16, Apple actually downgraded system level cache from 32 megabytes to 24 because they were using faster memory and could basically get away with it, right? So yeah, I'm just trying to tell you people, there is always something to be excited about. And these improvements, look, N2 versus N3E, right? It's not a huge jump, especially considering that N3P is coming in between, right? So those 5% here from N3E to N3P, that now turns it to a 5 to 10% improvement on N2E. So while it's still a larger improvement than N3E to N3P, it's not as impressive as these numbers actually suggest. And again, power consumption, hard to tell. Like Apple, the TSMC is weirdly optimistic about N3P when it comes to power efficiency, like potentially reducing it up to 10%, but I honestly couldn't tell you. Um, yeah, and then N2P versus N3E, like you can see, that might look impressive for like a potential 2-year jump, but when you actually compare N2P versus N2, it's barely an improvement, to the point that A16 versus N2P is not even too different than N2P was versus N2. Right, so those in between jumps might in some ways be actually more impressive, considering that they're basically just refinements, than those full node jumps. Do you think Apple Vision is a fair? Whitey is saying, I don't use cameras. I'm weird, but that's a benefit to me to not be picky about cameras. That's cool. Fully understand that, and especially like even I have a 15 Pro Max. Like I mostly use my main camera, so I guess even if Apple were to remove like the ultra wides, I would suffer a little bit from the removal of the telephoto. Now that I believe the telephoto is finally good enough. But I guess if you're coming from a phone that might have never even had a telephoto shooter, and now you're moving to a phone with a much larger, higher resolution sensor, so you can actually zoom in further than you ever could before, now one camera doesn't feel like a downgrade at all. Do I think Apple Vision is a failure, Matthew? This is actually, like, I guess we're almost kind of done with this rumor. You see, it's very short. It contradicts a little bit with what Min-Chi Kuo is saying, unless Min-Chi Kuo is literally saying only the 17 Pro Max is getting 12 gigabytes in vapor chamber, and maybe according to this rumor, 12 gigabytes would come to all 18 Pro models, not just the biggest one. Maybe Min-Chi Kuo, it's more like 12 gigabytes is coming to the 17 Pro, but not the regular 17. And this rumor is more like saying 12 gigabyte is coming to all iPhone 18 models, similar to how all iPhone 16 models have 8 gigabytes. This kind of stuff can change very, very quickly. Apple could change RAM capacity on like even the 17 series still like a few months before, like when they go into production. If they would have to, of course, to guarantee the supply of certain memory sticks. But for Apple, that is not too difficult. They could do that still in the next 4 or 5 months and decide, depending on what kind of large language models they plan on releasing, or not, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if the iPhone 7, my prediction is all iPhone 17 Pros get 12 gigs of RAM. And my expectation is that all iPhone 18 models, Pro and non-Pro alike, get 12 gigs of RAM, and then the iPhone 19 Pro then gets 16 gigs of memory. That is my prediction here. But there was another rumor here. Vision, let's say, is there Vision Pro stuff? Yeah. Gurman, Apple smart glasses and AirPods with cameras possibly launching in 2027. So I think that we should cover that first before we get to the cheaper Apple Vision. I always call it Apple Vision Air, but maybe you preferred another name. I just think for one, Vision Air sounds great. It kind of sounds like visionary, right? But also like Vision Pro, Vision Air, that is cheaper and lighter, makes a lot of sense given that we have what we have in like the MacBook lineup. Yeah, so that's why I will sometimes call the cheaper Vision Pro a Vision Air and not like a cheaper Vision Pro or just Apple Vision cheaper. Oh my God, I'm speaking so fast today. I don't know why. I haven't even had any caffeine yet. So this is from Mark Gurman, but again, I always want to tell you people, whenever Mark Gurman is making predictions that are 3 years off or something like that, they're never as reliable as his leaks and rumors for like the next 6 to 12 months. So take that with a giant pinch of salt. YTKR, do I think that Vapor Chamber plus basically N3P will give us coolest iPhone yet? Probably, yeah. There are other improvements that are unfortunately not going to be that impressive next year. Like, for example, I looked into the specs of the X80 modem from Qualcomm, and it's not terribly more better in any way than the X75. So that will not be, and I think with Wi-Fi, there is little that Apple can do before they jump to their own modem, but that isn't going to happen next year yet on the Pros. But yeah, I believe that's similar to how like even like the jump to N3E and ever so slightly improved cooling with like graphene heat pads on the A18 Pro, Apple made the 16 Pro Max technically the coolest iPhone yet. I don't see why the 17 Pro wouldn't be an improvement in that direction. I know that Apple now knows that pro consumers do focus on that stuff. So, but we'll have to see. So this is again Mark Gurman predictions for 2027. He's putting that into the context with like the Ray-Ban, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, collaboration that Meta currently has. Of course, Meta has showed off their what did they call it, Orion or something like that. Smart glasses. Of course, that was a prototype that cost $10,000 to make. So don't expect those to come in this way, shape, or form anytime soon to a consumer product near you. No, YT, the 17 Pro Max will not use an Apple custom modem. The rumor right now is that only the 17 Air will get that modem. My expectation is that that modem next year will be a little bit of a lower end solution, but it will still have it, like it won't have millimeter wave. That's 100% basically. My expectation, it will have Wi-Fi 7, but not the same peak speeds as like the really great Wi-Fi modems they might have on like at a next generation iPad Pro, for example. So my expectation is we are getting the new Apple modems on the new iPad Air next year, the iPhone SE4, and then the next rumor is that we are getting it in the iPhone 17 Air. But no, I wouldn't expect the Pro Max to have the custom Apple modem next year. The year after, a second generation product, a product that is much more premium, built on a cutting edge node and stuff like that, maybe. So Apple wants to salvage some of their multi-billion-dollar R&D investment in Apple Vision's Pro visual intelligence by bringing the tech to more products. Of course, we already know that even to a degree because it will be coming to the iPhone 16 series that, of course, have the A18 and A18 Pro chips. They have camera control to quickly invoke it. That makes sense. The glasses wouldn't be full AR glasses with displays, but rather smart glasses with built-in cameras, speakers, and mics, similar to Meta Ray-Ban glasses. Apple's will not cost $300. On top of that, the company is still planning AirPods with cameras. Those were infrared cameras. Whenever he uses the word cameras for AirPods, like it just sounds ridiculous, but that's because that is not really the rumor. I believe the idea was that you would kind of be able to use gestures in front of them. Like it's a little weird given that in my opinion AirPods Pro already have very good controls and Apple could just bring that same control to the basic AirPods, but alas, for some reason they might seem to want to do infrared. And this is where it gets confusing, where I don't know why you would write this article that way, where it's just like it's unclear why these would be an appealing product rather than just glasses. Like nobody's like, this is somebody who didn't understand the rumor. Like, let us get to what this rumor was actually about. Wait, there are rumors about AirPods Pro with real cameras? I thought there were rumors about like I thought there were AirPods with infrared cameras. AirPods infrared camera. Yeah, that was the original rumor. Nobody said they would have a full on like real camera. Like, I think people are getting like some stuff mixed up. Like, that was the rumor from Minchi Kuo. I think whoever is saying that AirPods are just coming with regular cameras has no idea about the actual technology. Like, the AirPods aren't thick enough. Their positioning is wrong for regular cameras. Like, they would be showing in weird directions depending where you put them in your ears. You would be potentially covering up the camera anytime you control them. Like, no. DIR cameras could be used in multiple ways, the report details. It could be used for in-ear hand gesture detection, work with devices like the Vision Pro to enhance spatial audio, right? To maybe the devices communicate with each other through IR and have better spatial understanding of where you are and stuff like that. To enhance or detect environmental changes for software, including the new Apple Intelligence. In my opinion, this sounds like a prototype that will either see the light of day with this, which is in-ear hand gesture detection, or if there really are AirPods out there with real cameras in them, like the battery life would be so shit in those devices. It just wouldn't make sense. Um, do I think Apple will use custom wearable telephoto or retina? Well, I don't think they will add another telephoto, but I would love for them to use wearable telephoto, similar to what Sony is doing. But Apple does have their own custom stuff that I don't know how well it would work with all of that. For example, Apple's like image stabilizer for their telephoto is arguably the absolute best right now. I would argue their sensor shift image stabilizer for the main camera is also the best. So I don't know how that impacts like the size of optics once you go with like a variable solution. But yeah, in my opinion, that would be really cool. Like LG was like building variable telephoto before being basically shut down. Well, not all of LG, but like since they didn't have their own phones, I guess it didn't make too much sense for them to keep being aggressive with the cameras, lenses, and stuff that they design. And I wish Sony would just like start selling their solutions and stop pretending that they are a player in the smartphone space. They simply aren't. So again, weird rumor with the AirPods and some conflicting stuff, but this to me, this sounds to me like Gurman has no idea. This to me sounds like Apple has prototypes because believe it or not, Apple always has prototypes for everything. Like I've had the guy in one of my previous videos who like really argued with me about like, no, if Apple had a competitor to like the new glasses from Meta, like Mark Gurman would have told us that Apple is stuck with Vision Pro. They have no idea how to exit it. And I'm like, bro, Mark Gurman doesn't know everything. And apparently Mark Gurman now knows that Apple might be actually doing smart glasses. So in my opinion, there's probably not a prototype, at least in the most basic way, like at least like a broad outline that doesn't exist at Apple when it comes to something that is even remotely possible, especially for a company that has always tried to like get rid of like a piece of glass or a trackpad or a keyboard to basically make you magically interact with your content. Of course, they will try to make glasses if they're technologically and price-wise feasible. But you know what was price-wise kind of non-feasible? That was Apple Vision Pro. Apple Vision Pro, of course, starting infamously at $3,500. So ever since they were introduced, people were asking, what can Apple do to reduce pricing? Will Apple do that? And this is where the report of a cheaper Apple Vision that I will just call Apple Vision Air come in. Now, this is also part of Mark Gurman reporting. He says it will cost around $2,000, which of course can mean anything from like, I assume from $1,500 to $2,500. Apple like far in advance, Apple really doesn't like to specify pricing internally, so that doesn't leak, and obviously it gives them room to change their mind later on. One of the biggest rumors that is being said about it is that Apple will be removing eyesight. So that's the feature where you, of course, see your own eyes. Well, not you, but other people see your eyes through Vision Pro because of it. It includes stuff like internal cameras, which granted they would have to be there anyway for stuff like eye control, but like for the visuals, I guess Apple could start using different cameras. Of course, it involves the LCD screen on the front, this layer of glass that almost gives this like this 3D effect. So that would be great opportunities to trim down cost. Another rumor is that Apple could reduce the pixel density basically by having essentially half the resolution of the current Vision Pro, and that they would have maybe downscale from an M series processor to maybe like a newer, faster A Pro chip, right? Don't forget, it also has its own, like, right now it's the R1 chip to handle all that data input from cameras and stuff like that. So it wouldn't be like literally halving the performance versus an M series chip. It would just be getting rid of some CPU and GPU performance, but still having all that extra overhead in the R series chip that would be handling cameras, sensor inputs, things like that. You can buy Vision Pro with 2000 from some retail stores, yes, but we are usually talking about devices that people bought, didn't like, sold pretty fast. That's not a sustainable market. And according to Mark Gurman, he says that Apple is targeting twice the sales for this Apple Vision Air than they do for like the current Apple Vision Pro. So they do seem to be somewhat realistic. And there's also talks about an Apple Vision Pro coming in 2026 with a faster chipset. I assume at that point it would be like an M5 based chip, with M5 probably launching late next year. So if this is like a product for early 2026 or maybe even the middle of 2026, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, like, and maybe they would improve on some things like the field of view for the internal screen. With that, maybe they could also give you a slightly larger screen too. And of course, maybe some improvements to eyesight, though if Apple considers removing it for the cheaper version, I'm just not sure how much of a priority it is. People talk about, well, if Vision Air is made out of plastic, that is technically better even because it will just dramatically reduce weight. And I'll have to tell people to calm down a little with those kinds of speculations because we don't know if it's going to be made of plastic. Believe me, the aluminum and the glass is not what makes Vision Pro that expensive. Yes, it adds to the cost, but it's not what makes Apple Vision Pro cost $3,500. That's the combination of the R1 chip, that new like flexible motherboard. It's those micro OLED panels inside that have incredibly low yields, and Sony struggles to supply enough of them even for the low demand that we see for Vision Pro. Even stuff like the way those stereo speakers are designed, I would argue probably contribute more to the cost than the fact that it's made of aluminum. If anything, it would be made out of plastic simply to reduce weight, and at that point, Apple Vision Air would also make a lot of sense as branding. But in my opinion, and maybe I should just look at the poll, what are people saying? Is the poll gone, or can I not load it for some reason? Weird. Their website should be compatible with Safari. But okay, whatever. Or maybe if I just click on it. Oh, yeah. Would a 2K lighter Apple Vision model appeal to you? Probably, I guess. 31% said yes, 23% said probably, 11% said unsure, 12% said probably not, and nope said 22%, which I assume these people are just saying even $2,000 will not appeal to them. Maybe no virtual reality headset will appeal to them. So who knows how people chose to interpret this question. Yeah, but I'm just trying to sell, like, making plastic premium products, because don't get me wrong, at $2,000 it would still count as one of Apple's more premium products. Like, it just never worked too well for Apple. Like, will they make another video calling it unapologetically plastic as we had with the iPhone 5C? I'm just not sure. So, Matthew, you asked me if I think Apple Vision Pro is a failure. No, I think it sells about in line with what was expected for a first generation, very expensive niche product. But I do believe that whether it's a failure or not will be decided in the next, like with the next generation and that cheaper device. Maybe it would take like a year or even two after the devices come out to really to really say if they are a failure or not, because Apple could still maybe play around a little bit with pricing and stuff like that. But in my opinion, Apple Vision Pro 1 basically doesn't mean anything. Whitey saying, my 13 started to lag a little bit. Do you think it's because of battery at 82% or 4 gigs of RAM? It depends on the task. I don't think that like the problem is battery capacity has nothing to do with the the battery's ability to provide enough power at once. Maybe at 82%, your battery itself is degraded, not just the capacity, but its ability to just give a nice flow of energy. And 4 gigs of RAM. Now, I am somebody who has always been impressed by just how much performance Apple can get out of 3 and 4 gig RAM devices. Like, of course, my grandma has my old iPhone XS Max with 4 gigs of RAM. That runs pretty well. But depending on the task, yeah, I would say like some games definitely would lag at 4 gigs of RAM in general. But sometimes it might just be like try restoring it once, right? And see like if the latest software update plus a completely fresh new operating system helps you. Storage can also be a part of that. If like your storage is completely full, that might impact your ability to quickly find all files there and stuff like that. So it really depends on the task. If you're just mean it lags during like regular scrolling on a website, then it might be like a software issue. Maybe something in the system just is a little bit not okay. Maybe it could be the battery. And since you plan on changing the battery anyway, right, you could come back here and let us know if it helped. But that's about it for today's, guys. We've been streaming for about 2 hours. Thank you so much for joining, for making this such an engaged and lively live chat. Yeah, YT, it could be just a software thing. So let me know once you try out a few solutions. I definitely cannot give you more memory, but I can, if you plan on changing your battery and if you plan on maybe restoring your device in the near future, let me know if any of that helped. Guys, we are wrapping up. Thank you again so much. Very lively live chat. Shout out again to Max Maximus leaving a super sticker in the beginning of the chat. A shout out to Angelica and Max Maximus, who are Mark Check Pro Max supporters on this channel. Well, if you're using low battery mode, that is actually the case, because yes, low battery mode will sometimes lower your performance. Like low battery mode drops like your CPU performance by over a half. Yeah, like that will definitely be impactful. So I guess we found the solution. So if you are still here and you want to leave a small donation in form of a super chat or sticker, or consider becoming a channel member or support your over on Patreon like they are, please consider doing so. Of course, just liking the video, sharing it out to anybody who think might enjoy it, and commenting. I always encourage you guys, please comment on the video, not just live, but also when it's been uploaded. That helps tremendously with the algorithm. And of course, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you know the next time when I'm live. There is a decent chance that we might get M4 Max, maybe like the redesigned Mac Mini, the MacBook Pro, the iMac. I would assume Apple probably launches the iMac first because it's the least exciting one. But I will be here throughout the week and reacting live to all of those announcements if they're actually true. So that's, I hope you guys can join me for that. So of course, subscribing and hitting the notification bell will be a big help in bringing us all together here. But that's about it for today. Since we might be seeing M4 devices, I will not tell you to recommend me too much stuff that I should react to. You guys see whenever I'm live with you, I also go through just simply older Apple rumors. I think that is good for all of us than making dedicated videos to every single rumor there is. Whitey saying, wishing me a nice day, and thanking me for all my efforts. Well, thanking you, and I'm thanking you for joining, and also thanking you for the very engaged, nice chat. I always like it when we can agree to disagree a little bit, try to find a common ground, try to debate a little bit in a fun way, like not in a hateful way. Bringing up competition is always fun when the person who brings it up knows what the competition is actually offering. because I see sometimes just people just say like, oh, these Android devices, they like are twice as good. And I'm like, really? When once you actually use the devices, are they actually twice as good for the money? So I like those kinds of discussions. Without further ado, thank you again. And I'll see you guys next time. This is Mark Tech tuning out.